How do people know we're a Christian? I'm asking this question each week. How do people know? Seriously, what tips them off? What about our lives just screams, this looks like Jesus? There are a lot of ways to answer this question, but today we see one answer is by bearing the fruit of peace, which begs the question, what is peace? In August of 2010, I got down on one knee and I proposed to Noel. We were at the High Museum of Art in downtown Atlanta. I had planned the whole evening. We were to go to dinner at Park 75 restaurant. It was in the Four Seasons Hotel, which was walking distance from the High Museum. I had the engagement ring. It was in my jacket pocket, and I was sweating bullets. I knew she would most likely say yes. I wasn't nervous necessarily about her answer. A few months prior, we had this totally awkward moment in the mall where we sized her finger at a jewelry store. You know, that's a totally normal thing to do. And walking down the mall together, I was just curious as to what side her ring finger should be. So we had the discussion about our futures together. So I wasn't necessarily nervous about her feelings towards me, and I definitely wasn't nervous about my feelings towards her. I just wanted the night to go well, and that's what made me anxious. So we're at dinner. It was lovely. The ring is still in my pocket, and I'm grasping on it for dear life. I remember always walking on her right side because the ring was in my right pocket, and I didn't want her to bump it or to feel it or to get too close to my jacket. I was really nervous, and I just really wanted the night to go well. So I chose this particular evening because it was the opening night to a Salvador Dali exhibit at the museum. And it just so happened that Salvador Dali is Noel's favorite surrealist artist. So here was my thought. We would leisurely walk through the museum, discussing the finer points of what we were seeing, holding hands, and then we'd get to the most famous melting clock. And I would get down on one knee, and then I'd pop the question. What I did not know is that the opening night was also a jazz festival, and 7 billion of our closest friends had also come out to celebrate this evening, and the line was excruciatingly long. And then 2 friends from ours in seminary saw us in line and pretended to be with us so they could cut about 6.4 billion of others to get in. So now I have friends around me that we have to talk to and entertain. It's a hot August Atlanta evening with the sun setting, and I have an engagement ring in my pocket, and it's dawning on me that there's nothing leisure happening in the next few hours. We were going to be shoulder to shoulder with strangers, no doubt about it. And I was not wrong. But it wasn't a terrible evening either. I resigned myself just to wait until we were out of the museum. I saw a little sidewalk off to the side with a park bench. It was secluded. I walked her over, away from the crowd, got down on one knee, and I asked her to marry me. At that moment, the stress of the evening, the anticipation, the crowds, the confusion, the best laid plans, all of it went out the window. And the peace that surpasses understanding fell on that moment. Nothing else seemed to matter, at least not in those few precious seconds. And we felt something holy, something that can only come from the divine. Scripture calls this moment peace. I do think sometimes we feel that God's peace has to feel stressless or void of distraction or the antithesis of despair. But now I think the opposite is true. Now, I'll admit, sitting alone on a beach or have a book in hand with your favorite reading nook, that is very peaceful. I'm not saying it's not. But God's peace is something that overtakes us, not in the absence of chaos, but smack down in the middle of it. That night with Noel was stressful. People were everywhere. It didn't go as planned, but yet I have to really think hard to remember the chaos. Because what sits in my soul from that night is that the waters parted, time stopped. Even though it was just for a moment, the peace of Christ swelled. and we were caught in what felt like an enveloping loop of love. God's peace, life-changing kind of peace. It comes not at the absence of chaos, but smack down in the middle of it. And that's true for the Israelites when you read Isaiah 40. Now, I have to tell you, to really read Isaiah and to get it, you have to understand that there are actually 3 Isaiahs written from 3 different time periods. Scholars call it 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Isaiah. If you've never heard of this before, let me be the one to tell you. Isaiah from beginning to end is not written by the same person. Isaiah is a pseudonym. There was an Isaiah originally, but later writers used that same name to further his story. And this was common. It just is what it is. To not know this detail, though, is to really miss something important when you're reading Isaiah. It would be like standing in front of a Salvador Dali painting and not really sure as to what it is you're looking at. You can be right in front of it, engaging with it, listening to it, but still miss it at the exact same time. So let me help. The 3 Isaiahs were written during 3 completely different empires: Assyrian, Babylonian, and Persian. Quick overview of Israelite history will tell you that after Israel became a monarchy, think King David, King Solomon, the country split into 2. Israel was in the north and Judah was in the south. The Assyrians attacked and sacked the northern kingdom, Israel, and then everyone retreated south to Jerusalem and Judah. This is 1st Isaiah, and it's chapters 1 to 39. The Assyrian dynasty eventually falls to Babylon, and Babylon sacks and burns Jerusalem, exiling all the Judeans and destroying their holy temple. This is 2nd Isaiah, and it opens in Isaiah 40. And then it goes through chapter 55. Babylon eventually falls to Persia, and the Persian rulers allow Israel to return to their promised land and rebuild their temple. Think Ezra and Nehemiah. This is 3rd Isaiah, and it finishes out the book, starting in Isaiah 56. You have to understand this history to truly appreciate what we're seeing and reading in Isaiah 40. It's the first words uttered from God after the Babylonian exile. It's the first words uttered from God after Israel found themselves in the worst of all chaos. Isaiah 40 starts 2nd Isaiah. Think about it like this. A more powerful enemy destroys your livelihood, destroys your businesses and homes, burns the center of your culture, burns your temple to your God. All that history, all of that culture, all those memories of being God's chosen people, they're gone, burned, and you are homeless and on the run. You will be killed if you don't escape into exile. Decades of silent and destitute living unfold. You are a shadow of yourself, a shadow of your people group, a shadow of your family's lineage, and every ounce of your soul is in despair. You know nothing of peace. You are lost to utter chaos. And that's when we hear these words. Comfort. Oh, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that she has served her term, that her penalty is paid, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice cries out, in the wilderness prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted up, every mountain and hill be made low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the rough places a plain. Then the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all people shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. This is peace that surpasses understanding. It reverberates in the midst of chaos. It's a promise, a word, a spark, a jolt, a balm in the face of such calamity, a sound in the midst of silence. Knowing this history amplifies the power of this moment. A voice cries out, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Isaiah 40 is a shout of peace in the midst of chaos, reminding us God is coming and there will soon be peace on earth. I don't want to dilute the significance of this moment for Israel, but I need to make the connection to us today. I know there is chaos in your life. I know it. It's all around us in the news, in our country, in our families, wars across the world, gas prices, a pandemic that won't stop, the stress of this year, it's showing on our faces. Everything is hard, and I get it. So let me offer to you what Isaiah offers to Israel as a word from the Lord in the midst of their chaos. Comfort. Oh, comfort my people, says God. This is good news we get from Isaiah 40, and it's for all of us today. In the midst of our chaos, whether it's created by us or the world around us, it doesn't matter. In the midst of chaos, if we learn to look closely enough, we'll find what we need in the form of peace. The kind of peace that surpasses understanding. The kind of peace that only God can bring. The kind of peace that assures our soul that God is with us, even in the chaos. The kind of peace that allows us to continually bear good fruit. We have to be people who grow and put into this world peace. And think long and hard about what this could look like for you in your life, for our community. There is so much chaos, and you're called to bear peace for others to feel it, to have it, to keep it. And then ask yourself, what chaos are you in? And in your bones, ask God if He can be present in the midst of that chaos. Because what we need is a Prince of Peace. If you can hold all of this, then you're well on your way to growing the good fruit of peace.